The afternoon sun beat down on the chaotic energy of the city market, casting long shadows from stalls overflowing with vibrant silks and the pungent aroma of street food. Amidst the haggling vendors and hurried shoppers, a small figure sat with an air of profound stillness. Bin Bao, no older than 5, presided over a rickety folding table, a hand-painted sign beside her proclaiming fortunes told, fates change. Her pigtails were tied with simple red string, and her eyes, dark and impossibly old, watched the river of humanity flow by. Most people offered a passing smile, amused by the child playing a grown-up's game. They saw a cute gimmick, not a diminutive oracle. Then, a woman of elegant bearing, her silver hair styled immaculately, paused before the stall. Her Chanel suit was a stark contrast to the market's grit, but the deep-set sorrow in her eyes was a currency understood everywhere. This was Huo Meiling, matriarch of the formidable Huo family. Though to Bin Bao, she was just a grandma with a fractured soul. "And what kind of fortunes does a little one like you tell?" the grandma asked, her voice kind, laced with the gentle condescension of an adult humoring a child. Bin Bao didn't smile. She simply looked up, her gaze direct, the kind that need to be heard. The answer was so devoid of childish playfulness that Huo Meiling was taken aback. Her eyes drifted over the child, and as they did, Bin Bao's own gaze locked onto a piece of jewelry resting against the woman's silk blouse. It was a jade pendant, carved into an intricate knot, its green so deep it was nearly black. A jolt, sharp and clear as a bell's chime, went through Bin Bao. A phantom warmth spread from her own chest, where nearly identical charm lay hidden beneath her simple t-shirt. It was a connection she felt not with her mind, but with her very essence. Her voice, when she spoke again, was soft but held an unwavering certainty. "Grandma, you're looking for someone." It wasn't a question. "Your heart is broken because you lost a grandchild a long time ago." Huo Meiling's polite facade shattered. Her hand flew to her chest, covering the pendant as if to protect a raw wound. Tears instantly welled in her eyes. The disappearance of her first grandchild was the family's deepest, most unspoken grief. How could you know that?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "I can help you find him," Bin Bao stated calmly. As if discussing the weather, she tilted her head. "Your other son, the one they call Uncle Huo, he needs my help too." The mention of her youngest son, Huo Xian, solidified the child's otherworldly credibility. Overwhelmed by a sudden, desperate surge of hope, Huo Meiling made a decision that would alter the course of her family's destiny. She reached out, her manicured fingers gently taking Bin Bao's small hand. "Come with me," she pleaded, her voice thick with emotion. "Please, child, come home with me." An hour later, Bin Bao stood in the cavernous living room of the Huo family mansion. The polished marble floors reflected the light from a crystal chandelier the size of a small car. The air smelled of lemon polish and expensive orchids. Yet, the opulence did nothing to impress her. She could feel the house's energy. It was heavy, stagnant, and laced with a quiet despair that clung to the silk wallpaper. The grandeur was a mask for a deep-seated rot. The front door opened, and Huo Xian strode in. He was a man carved from ambition and pressure, his handsome face etched with a permanent weariness. He loosened his tie as he walked, his sharp gaze immediately landing on the strange child standing beside his mother. "Mother, what is this?" he asked, his voice low and strained. He had just come from another disastrous meeting where a competitor had, yet again, anticipated his every move, securing a contract he'd spent months cultivating. "Xian, this is Bin Bao." "She's special," Huo Meiling said, her hope making her sound almost girlish. "She knows things." Huo Xian's lip curled in a cynical sneer. He looked from his mother's pleading face to the solemn child. "Special? Mother, she's a child. Did you pick up another street performer?" I don't have time for games. Send this little liar on her way. The word liar hung in the air, sharp and ugly. Beanbao didn't flinch. Instead, she took a deliberate step forward, her ancient eyes meeting his dismissive ones without a trace of fear. She held up a small, yellow paper talisman, pinched between her thumb and forefinger with surprising grace. "Uncle Huo," she said, her voice clear and ringing in the vast room. "You don't believe me. Let me read your fortune." Huo Xian was about to refuse, to call for security. But something in her unblinking stare held him fast. He was exhausted, frustrated, and on the verge of paranoia. Against his better judgment, he gave a curt, dismissive nod. "Fine. Impress me." Beanbao's eyes half closed as she focused on him. "For 3 months, your luck has been draining away like water through a sieve. Projects you should have won have been stolen from under you. You sign contracts and the partners back out. You lie awake at night, feeling a weight on your chest. But the doctors say nothing is wrong." Every word was a perfectly placed blow. Huo Xian's composure, the carefully constructed armor of a CEO, began to crack. His face went pale. These were not generic troubles. They were the precise, secret agonies that had been plaguing his waking moments and haunting his sleep. How could she know? Beanbao's small finger then lifted, pointing directly at his left wrist. On it, he wore a bracelet made of dark, polished Bodhi beads, a gift from a new business associate meant to bring peace and prosperity. "That is the cause," she said, her tone turning grave. "It's not a blessing. It's a funeral item, buried with the dead to absorb resentment and malice. It has been feeding on your fortune and poisoning your spirit. Someone gave it to you not as a gift, but as a curse." Huo Xian froze, his gaze dropping to the bracelet. Suddenly, the cool, smooth beads felt reptilian against his skin, a sinister weight he had willingly worn. The air in the room grew cold, heavy with the implication of betrayal. He looked from the bracelet to the child, whose serious expression held no hint of deceit. A flicker of profound unease, a terrifying suspicion that her impossible words held an uncanny truth, took root deep within him. He was a man of logic and reason, but he could not ignore the chilling accuracy of the tiny fortune teller standing before him. The sterile air of the Huo Corporation boardroom felt suffocating. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, glinting off the polished mahogany table, but the atmosphere was as cold as a morgue. Huo Xian sat at the head, his jaw a tight line of granite. On the holographic display before them, red numbers bled across financial projections like a mortal wound. Their flagship AI logistics project, the cornerstone of their next fiscal year, had just suffered a catastrophic data corruption event. It was inexplicable, untraceable, and perfectly timed to annihilate a multi-billion-dollar merger. His executives, a collection of the sharpest minds in the industry, were floundering, their panicked jargon a meaningless buzz in his ears. All he could hear was the echo of a child's solemn voice. "Someone close to you doesn't just want your fortune, Uncle Huo. They want your life." He had dismissed it, a child's fantasy. But now, watching his empire teeter on the edge of a manufactured abyss, a chilling dread crawled in his gut. This wasn't a market fluctuation. It was a targeted assassination of his company, his life's work. It felt personal. It felt cursed. A tiny figure sat in the corner of his office, visible through the glass wall separating it from the boardroom. Beanbao. She had insisted on coming. A strange, quiet wait in his car that morning, her expression unreadable. Now, she was drawing circles on a notepad, seemingly oblivious to the crisis unfolding just meters away. As the meeting devolved into frantic blame casting, Huo Xian pushed his chair back and strode into his office, sealing the soundproof door behind him. The sudden silence was a relief. "They're all running in circles," Beanbao stated without looking up, her voice a stark contrast to the corporate hysteria. The bad energy is too thick. It's clinging to you. Huo Xian ran a hand through his hair, his composure fraying. Beanbao, this is a server failure, not a ghost story. She finally lifted her gaze, her eyes clear and unnervingly perceptive. Is it? The numbers fell at the most unlucky hour, on the most unlucky day. The problem isn't in the computers, Uncle Huo, it's with you. She stood and walked to his massive desk, her small hand retrieving a folded yellow paper talisman from her pocket. With a quiet, deliberate motion, she slid it beneath the corner of his leather desk blotter. This will help clear your head, just for a little while. He wanted to argue, to cling to the logic that had built his empire. But exhaustion and a sliver of desperate hope made him weak. As her fingers retreated, he could have sworn a faint, warm light pulsed from the hidden paper, a warmth that spread through the cold wood of the desk and into his own weary limbs. The frantic pounding in his temples eased, and for the first time in hours, a single, clear thought cut through the fog. The prayer beads, the ones Johan had given him that evening. The amber glow of the lamps in Huo Xian's private study did little to warm the room. The space, usually a sanctuary of leather-bound books and quiet contemplation, felt like a cage. Across from him, Johan swirled a glass of brandy, the picture of casual concern. He was Huo Xian's oldest friend, his confidant, the man he trusted more than his own family. A data breach of that magnitude. It has to be an inside job, Xian, Joe said, his voice laced with practiced sympathy. You need to lock everything down. Huo Xian stared at the string of polished beads sitting on the table between them. You told me these were for good fortune, he said, his voice dangerously level. A monk blessed them for protection. Johan's smile was disarming, and he did. I paid a fortune for them. Why? Beanbao says they're cursed. She said they're designed to drain my luck, my energy, my life. The words sounded insane even as he spoke them, but the memory of the warmth from the talisman, the clarity it had brought, gave them weight. Joe let out a short, pitying laugh. He leaned forward, his expression earnest. Xian, listen to yourself. You're letting a child, a clever little fortune teller, get in your head during a corporate crisis. She's probably a grifter, sent by one of your rivals to destabilize you. It's an old trick. Make the powerful man paranoid, and he'll tear his own empire down. He gestured to the beads. Those are a symbol of our friendship. Don't let some street urchin poison that. Huo Xian's resolve wavered. Joe's logic was sound. It was the world he understood. Maybe he was just stressed, looking for a supernatural explanation for a sophisticated corporate espionage plot. The study door creaked open. Beanbao stood in the doorway, her small frame silhouetted against the hall light. In her hand, she held another yellow talisman. This one marked with a complex, ink-black sigil. She's not a street urchin, Beanbao said, her voice small but filling the cavernous room. And you're not a friend. Johan's friendly demeanor vanished, replaced by a flash of irritation. The adults are talking, little girl. Run along. Beanbao ignored him. She walked toward the fireplace, her eyes locked on Joe. With a flick of her wrist, she tossed the talisman into the low flames. It didn't burn. Instead, the paper flared with an instantaneous, soundless burst of emerald light, and the sigil on it glowed intensely for a second before turning to ash. A sudden, invisible pressure filled the room. Johan gasped, dropping his brandy glass. It shattered on the marble floor. His face, once a mask of suave concern, twisted into a horrifying sneer. His eyes, wild and bloodshot, fixed on Huo Xian with a lifetime of burning hatred. You, he snarled, the voice no longer his own. It was raw, guttural, ripped from the depths of his soul. It was always you. Born with the golden spoon. The perfect family, the Midas touch. While I had to claw and scrape for everything, I was always smarter. Always worked harder. But luck always chose you. Huoshin froze, his blood turning to ice. This was the real Johan. Those beads weren't enough. Joe raved, spittle flying from his lips. They were supposed to make you sick. Drain you slowly, make your mind weak until I could take over. But you're too damn lucky. So I helped things along. The project, the merger, all me. I wanted to watch you lose everything before you die. Just like I was supposed to have everything. I want your life. Chien. I want to be you. The confession, brutal and absolute, hung in the air. The truthling spell had ripped away the facade, exposing the rot of jealousy that had festered for decades. Huoshin stared at the man he once called a brother, his face a pale, numb mask of shock. He slowly reached for the intercom on his desk, his hand trembling slightly. "Security," he said, his voice a hoarse whisper. "To my study." Now, bodyguards flooded the room, their professional comma jarring contrast to Johan's continued, delirious ranting. They hauled him away, his curses echoing down the long marble hallway until they were finally swallowed by silence. Huoshin remained standing, a statue in the wreckage of his shattered trust. The study felt vast and empty. On the floor, the shards of the broken glass glittered like fallen stars, and beside them, the cursed beads lay scattered, their polished surfaces reflecting the face of a man who had just discovered his closest friend was his deadliest enemy. The heavy stillness of the Huo family living room shattered like a drop face. Huo Mingyang, the third uncle, burst through the ornate double doors, his face a blotchy mask of panic. He stumbled into the center of the room, a sheaf of papers clutched in a trembling hand, his usually slick hair now a disheveled mess. "It's over," he gasped, his voice cracking. "It's all over." The family, gathered around Grandpa Huo's recliner, turned as one. The air, already thick with worrying over the patriarch's recent, suspicious fall, grew suffocating. "The bank called in the loan," Mingyang announced, his gaze darting wildly between his elder brother and Huoshin. "The one for the overseas expansion. They're demanding immediate repayment. We have 24 hours. A collective gasp filled the room. Huoshin's face hardened, his jaw tight. "That's impossible. The repayment date wasn't for another 6 months. They say the terms were amended." Mingyang's voice rose to a hysterical pitch. He threw the papers onto the mahogany coffee table, where they scattered like fallen leaves. "They're threatening to liquidate our assets, and to secure the loan. I had to," he swallowed, unable to meet anyone's eyes. "I used the ancestral home as collateral." Panic erupted. Aunts and cousins began shouting over one another, a cacophony of accusation and fear. Grandpa Huo, looking impossibly frail in his chair, tried to push himself up, his breath coming in shallow rasps. The stress was a physical weight, pressing down on his already weakened heart. "Quiet," a small, clear voice commanded. The chaos subsided, turning all heads toward the source. Yin Bao stood beside Huoshin, her expression serene, a stark contrast to the turmoil around her. She looked at the frantic third uncle with an unnervingly calm gaze. "The loan documents are fake, third uncle," she stated simply. "The date was tampered with. You're being manipulated by a man named Chang Senho." A thick, stern silence followed. Huo Mingyang's face cycled from shock to a defensive, crimson rage. "What are you talking about? A child spouting nonsense. Who is this Chang Senho? You're just trying to cause more trouble, aren't you?" He pointed a shaking finger at her. "Ever since you showed up, this family has been in chaos. First Grandpa's fall, now this. You're a curse." His accusations were sharp, but his eyes betrayed him. There was a flicker of guilt, the telltale sign of a man cornered by a truth he thought was buried. Hyo-shin stepped protectively in front of Beanbao, his shadow covering her small frame. He had seen that look in her eyes before, the unwavering certainty I had warned him, moments too late, about his grandfather's fall. He didn't understand how she knew these things, only that she was right more often than she was wrong. Enough. Third uncle. Shien's voice was low and cold as steel. Where is this lender? Beanbao tugged on the sleeve of his tailored suit jacket. Let me go with you. Uncle Hyo, she whispered, her voice firm. I can prove it. I can protect our home. Hyo-shin looked down at her. In her eyes, he saw not the naivete of a child, but the resolve of a warrior. He gave a single, decisive nod. Jang Senho's office was the epitome of cold, corporate power. A wall of glass offered a panoramic view of the city skyline, but inside, everything was chrome, black leather, and sterile silence. Mr. Jang sat behind a desk the size of a small car, a smug smile playing on his lips. He slid a document across the polished surface toward Hyo-shin. As you can see, Mr. Hyo, the terms are quite clear, he said, his tone dripping with condescending victory. The amendment was signed. The new repayment date is today. Business is business. Hyo-shin picked up the IOU. The forgery was expert level, his uncle's signature flawlessly replicated. His knuckles turned white as he gripped the paper. The demand was explicit. The company's controlling shares or the deed to the Hyo family's ancestral home. This is fraud, Shin stated, his voice a low growl. Jang Senho laughed. A short, ugly sound. A difficult thing to prove in 24 hours. Your family's sentimentality for that whole house is your greatest weakness. It's a pity, really. You're right. A small voice piped up. Jang Senho and his leering assistant looked past Hyo-shin to see Beanbao stepping forward. She hopped onto one of the ridiculously oversized leather chairs, her little legs dangling far from the floor. It's not good to be sentimental, she continued, pulling a piece of folded yellow paper from her pocket. It looked like something a child would draw on, covered in strange, red symbols. So I made a new IOU. She unfolded it with a flourish. You have one, and I have one. It's only fair. Jang Senho squinted at her, then burst out laughing again. What is this? A joke? Get this child out of my office. Beanbao simply smiled. My IOU says you took something that wasn't yours, and now you owe the Hyo family. With interest, she pointed a tiny finger at him. A very high interest. It's called a curse. As she spoke the word curse, a strange thing happened. The smug smile on Jang Senho's face froze. He blinked, a sudden wave of dizziness washing over him. He tried to stand, to dismiss the girl, but his legs felt like jelly. A sharp, stabbing pain shot through his chest, and he stumbled backward, clutching his heart as he collapsed onto the plush carpet, gasping for air. His assistant rushed to his side, his face pale with shock. You see, Beanbao said cheerfully, hopping off the chair. With a mischievous grin, she walked over to the groaning man. Now, you have to sign. Before Hyo-shin could process what was happening, Beanbao grabbed Jang Senho's limp hand and pressed his thumb onto a red ink pad she produced from another pocket. She then firmly stamped his thumbprint onto her yellow paper IOU. She did the same with his terrified assistant. There, she announced, holding up the paper with its two red prints. A deal is a deal. She turned to the utterly astonished Hyo-shin, her expression bright and innocent. This is what my master called treating others with their own way. He can have his fake paper, and we'll keep the real one. Hyo-shin stared, speechless, from the girl holding the karmic contract to the two men writhing on the floor. He didn't know if it was magic, a psychological trick, or a power from beyond his understanding. All he knew was that this small child had just single-handedly disarmed their enemy with a piece of paper and a promise of justice, leaving him in a state of profound, unsettling awe. The VIP hospital suite was saturated with the cloying scent of antiseptic and lily, a sterile battleground where memory fought against a dense, encroaching fog. Grandpa Hugo, propped against a mountain of starched pillows, looked diminished, his usual commanding presence replaced by a fragile confusion. His brow was furrowed in a permanent state of effort, his gaze drifting aimlessly around the room. I don't remember a car, he murmured, his voice a dry rasp. Just the stairs. The landing. Hugo Sheehan stood beside the bed, his hand resting gently on his grandfather's arm. Relief that the old man was awake warred with the deep unease twisting in his gut. Beside him, Huo Mingyang, the third son, hovered with an air of practiced concern. Dad, the doctor said memory loss is perfectly normal after such a shock, Mingyang said, his tone smooth as polished stone. You were in a car accident on your way to the company. You must have hit your head. Bean Bao, standing quietly near the foot of the bed, tilted her head. Her small stature made her almost invisible in the spacious room, but her focus was laser-sharp. While the men saw a confused elder, she saw the faint, violet-tinged bruises blooming just beneath the sagging skin of his neck. They were subtle, like the imprints of desperate fingers, a stark contradiction to the narrative of a car crash. Grandpa Huo, she said, her voice clear and cutting through the tense quiet. Your neck hurts, doesn't it? Right here. She took a small step forward, her tiny finger pointing directly to the hidden marks. Huo Xian's gaze followed hers, his eyes narrowing. He hadn't noticed them before. Ming Yang's smile tightened, the first crack in his calm facade. What nonsense, Ming Yang scoffed. It's probably just from the felines or how he was lying. Bean Bao ignored him. She moved to the old man's side, her dark, knowing eyes fixed on his. She didn't touch him, but a subtle energy seemed to flow from her, a quiet hum that soothed the chaotic static in his mind. She whispered, almost too low to hear, a single, ancient syllable. Grandpa Huo's vacant eyes suddenly sharpened. A flicker of something raw fear flashed across his face. No, he gasped, his hand weakly rising. Not a car. Someone was holding me, pushing me. I couldn't breathe. His gaze darted wildly, landing on his third son. The smell, that bitter cologne, panic, stark and undisguised, seized Huo Mingyang. He's delirious. This is absurd. Xian, are you seriously going to let this? This street psychic upset him. We need to call the doctor. He moved to press the nurse's call button, a desperate attempt to regain control of the situation. But Bean Bao was faster. She stepped between him and the bed, a tiny, immovable guardian. Her expression was solemn, her voice devoid of any childish lilt. It was you, she stated, not as a question, but as a fact. You pushed him. You smell of the same bitter cologne right now. The accusation hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Huo Mingyang froze, his face draining of all color for a split second. Before the outrage and denial could be constructed, Huo Xian saw it. Pure, undiluted terror in his uncle's eyes. It was all the confirmation he needed. We're leaving, Huo Xian announced, his voice like chipping ice. He guided Bean Bao toward the door, his mind already racing, connecting dots that had been invisible moments before. We're going to the police station now. The interrogation room was a cold, grey box, the air thick with the metallic taste of stale fear. Through the one-way mirror, Huo Xian watched Mr. Chang, the man who had nearly bankrupted a subsidiary of the Huo Corporation. Chang was sweating under the single, harsh light, but his posture was stubbornly defiant. I've told you everything, Zhang insisted, his voice raspy. The numbers were bad. I made a foolish bet and lost the company's money. I acted alone. Bean Bao sat beside Huoxian in the darkened observation room, swinging her legs. From her pocket, she produced a small, folded piece of yellow paper, scribbling a complex, spidery symbol on it with a crayon. He won't talk, she said simply. He's been protected. Huoxian nodded grimly, gesturing to his assistant. Get us in there. The door clicked open, and the atmosphere in the interrogation room shifted. Mr. Chang's smugness wavered as Huoxian, an imposing figure of cold fury, entered, followed by the small, silent girl. Let's try this one more time, Mr. Chang. Huoxian began, his voice dangerously low. Who was your accomplice? I told you. As he spoke, Bean Bao, with the guileless clumsiness of a child, stumbled near his chair, dropping her crayon. As she bent to retrieve it, her hand brushed against the leg of his trousers, her fingers pressing the tiny, folded talisman against the fabric. No one but her noticed. She stood up, her face impassive. Zhang's body went rigid. His eyes bulged, the denial on his lips dying as his mouth began to move against his will. The words spilled out, strangled and horrified. He told me. Huo Mingyang. He promised me 10%. If I framed Huoxian. He said the old man was out of the picture. A violent spasm racked his body. He clutched at his throat, his face turning a mottled purple as he choked, a horrible, wet, gurgling sound escaping his lips. He pitched forward, vomiting a stream of dark, viscous blood onto the concrete floor. The detectives jumped back in shock. Huoxian instinctively moved to shield Bean Bao, but she was already staring at the grim scene with an unnerving clinical detachment. It's a goo worm, she announced, her voice echoing in the stunned silence. It was planted inside him. It feeds on his life force. If he ever spoke his master's name, it was meant to kill him. The talisman only forced it out. Huoxian stared from the convulsing man to the preternaturally calm child. A chilling realization washed over him. This wasn't just corporate espionage or attempted murder. This was something far older, far darker, and the news of their visit to this specific police station, at this specific time, couldn't be a coincidence. Someone tipped them off that we were coming. Bean Bao added, reading his thoughts. Someone from inside your house. The final piece clicked into place. The doctor who had insisted it was a car accident. His uncle's frantic desperation at the hospital. This intricate, malevolent web. Pulling out his phone. Huoxian's thumb moved with cold, swift precision. His voice, when he spoke to his head of security, was stripped of all warmth, leaving only the chilling promise of retribution. Lock down Dr. Chen's office at the hospital, access all his records and communications, and put a tail on my third uncle, Huo Mingyang. I want to know everywhere he goes, every breath he takes, now. The sprawling city glittered below, a silent witness to the storm brewing on the top floor of Huo Corporation headquarters. Inside Huoxian's office, the air was thick with the scent of stale coffee and unspoken dread. The silence was a taut string, stretched between Huoxian at his mahogany desk, his grandmother in a high-backed chair, her face a mask of grief, and Bean Bao, who stood small and still by the window, her reflection a ghostly image against the skyline. The door opened with a soft click. Lin, Huoxian's ever-composed assistant, stepped inside, his expression grim. He held a tablet, its screen casting a cold, blue light on his face. Sir, he began, his voice low but cutting through the tension. We found him. Dr. Chen. Huoxian's jaw tightened, the only sign of the pressure building within him. And, he confessed, Lin said, swiping a finger across the screen to reveal a grainy surveillance photo. It showed a nervous-looking man in a doctor's coat meeting another figure in the shadowed corner of an underground parking garage. The second man's arm was visible for a split second, covered in an intricate dragon tattoo. He admitted to switching the chairman's medication. He was paid a significant sum by a man matching the description of the one who sabotaged the company servers. They wanted the chairman incapacitated. Not dead, just long enough for a hostile takeover. Grandma Huo let out a strangled sob, pressing a hand to her mouth. Every piece of Bean Bao's strange, cryptic warnings had clicked into place, forming a picture of betrayal so monstrous it was hard to comprehend. As if on cue, the office door swung open again, this time without a knock. Huo Mingyang strode in, his face a carefully constructed facade of concern. "Uncle, Grandma, I heard the news about Grandpa's doctor. Absolutely shocking. I came as soon as I could. We need to find who's behind this." Huo Xian didn't look up from the tablet. He simply gestured for Lin to turn the screen toward his cousin. "We already have." Huo Mingyang's eyes flickered to the image. For a moment, his confident mask curled. Then, a microscopic crack appeared. He paled, the blood draining from his face as he recognized the tattooed enforcer he had so carefully kept at arm's length. The game was up. His mind raced, calculating odds, searching for an escape route. There was none. Panic, cold and sharp, flooded his veins. "This is absurd. A doctored photo," he stammered, his voice suddenly shrill. "You can't possibly believe." He didn't finish. In a surge of pure animal instinct, he spun on his heel and bolted for the door. He was fast, fueled by the terror of exposure, his hand reaching for the handle. But just as his fingers brushed the cool metal, his feet tangled as if caught in an invisible net. He pitched forward, a cry of shock escaping his lips. A small, paper talisman, tucked discreetly into the doorframe's molding by Bean Bao's earlier, glowed with a faint, imperceptible light for a fraction of a second before fading back into obscurity. Huo Mingyang crashed to the floor, the sound of his body hitting the expensive carpet a dull, pathetic thud. The fall wasn't just physical, it was the collapse of his ambition, his pride, his entire life. Huo Xian rose slowly, his movements deliberate and menacing. He walked around the desk, his polished leather shoes making no sound, and stood over his fallen cousin. The cold fury that had been simmering beneath his calm exterior now radiated from him like a winter chill. "Get up," he commanded, his voice a low, dangerous growl. Mingyang scrambled backward on his hands and knees, his designer suit rumpled, his face twisted in a snarl of desperation. "You have no proof. It's my word against a disgraced doctor's, is it?" Huo Xian countered, his tone deceptively soft. He nodded to Lin, who tapped another icon on the tablet. A voice filled the room, Mingyang's voice, captured on a hidden recording. It was a call he'd made from a burner phone, arrogant and confident, giving instructions to transfer the final payment once his grandfather was declared mentally incompetent. It detailed the shell corporations, the offshore accounts, the entire venomous plan to bleed the Huo family dry from the inside. The blood drained completely from Mingyang's face, leaving it a waxy, sallow color. The last of his bluster evaporated, replaced by hollow-eyed horror. He had been so careful, so meticulous. He had accounted for everything except the one variable he could never have predicted: the quiet, unassuming girl standing by the window. "You plotted to destroy our grandfather." Huo Xian's voice was devoid of all emotion now. A flat, dead thing. "You schemed to steal from the family that raised you. All for what? Money. Power you never earned." He didn't wait for an answer. Security, two uniformed guards, who had been waiting silently in the hall, entered the office. They moved with practiced efficiency, each taking one of Ming Yang's arms and hauling him to his feet. The fight had gone out of him completely. His rage curdled into a brittle, silent despair. As they dragged him away, his head hung low, a portrait of utter defeat. The heavy office door clicked shut behind them, sealing his fate and plunging the room into a profound, ringing silence. The immediate aftermath was heavy, the air still tasting of poison. Then, Grandma Huo finally broke. A shuddering breath escaped her, and she rose on trembling legs. She didn't look at her grandson. Her tear-filled eyes were fixed solely on Binbao. She crossed the room and enveloped the small girl in a fierce, desperate hug. Her expensive perfume mingled with the scent of ozone left by the spent talisman. "Child," she wept, a voice thick with gratitude and shame, "my foolish, old eyes couldn't see. We brought a viper into our home, and we didn't see the angel standing right in front of us." She pulled back, her hands framing Binbao's face, her thumbs gently wiping away a tear Binbao hadn't even realized she'd shed. "You saved him. You saved all of us. You are not a guest in this house. Do you understand? You are my granddaughter, my true granddaughter." The words landed with the weight of a decree, a final, unconditional acceptance that washed over Binbao. Healing wounds she hadn't known were still so raw. She leaned into the embrace, a sense of belonging finally taking root in her restless heart. After a long moment, Grandma Huo, emotionally exhausted, was escorted out by Lin to rest. The office was quiet again, occupied only by the man who commanded an empire and the girl who could see the threads of fate. Huo Xian moved to the window, standing beside Binbao. For a while, they just watched the river of light from the traffic far below. The tension in his shoulders had finally eased, replaced by deep, weary gratitude. "My grandmother is right," he said, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. He turned to face her, his dark eyes searching hers, a cold CEO replaced by a man stripped of all pretense. "You did more than expose a traitor. You held this family together when I couldn't."